All right, so let's pop open a bottle, so to speak, take a deep dive into a region you might not expect when it comes to like world-class wines. The Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, Canada. You send in this really cool overview, originally written in Portuguese, and honestly, my first thought was Canadian wine. Is that like all ice wine?
That's the stereotype for sure, but the Okanagan Valley, it's really turning heads in the wine world, proving that Canadian wine is, it's so much more than just that one style.
Okay, color me intrigued. Stunning landscapes, interesting grape varieties, and this article even mentions some international awards. What's the story here? Is Canadian wine having like its moment?
Well, the Okanagan Valley is definitely leading the charge. It produces a whopping 86% of British Columbia's wine. So it's not just a regional success story. It's really shaping Canada's whole wine identity.
So let's talk terroir. I know that means more than just pretty scenery, but help paint the picture for us. What makes the Okanagan so special for growing grapes?
Okay, so imagine this. Okanagan Lake is huge and it acts like a giant temperature regulator. So the vineyards are protected from like extreme heat or cold. And then you've got mountains shielding them from harsh winds, creating these like perfect little microclimates.
Wait, so it's like th- nature built this like giant outdoor wine cellar. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And what about the soil? I'm guessing it's not just one type.
Oh, not at all. You've got glacial deposits, gravel, sand, and clay all mixed in. This variety is really what contributes to the complexity of the wines. Actually, one winemaker in the article, he described it as walking on a beach, and then a few feet later, you're in an area with volcanic rock.
Wow, that's a pretty vivid description.
Right.
So we've got this awesome natural setup. How does that like translate into different wines? I know the Okanagan has different subregions, right?
Exactly. Think of it like a distinct neighborhoods within the valley. Kelowna in the north is the largest city, and it's
Yeah.
known for its like crisp aromatic whites.
So if I'm like a Riesling or Pinot Gris fan, Kelowna is where I should head.
You got it. Then there's Penticton. It's further south and it's warmer there. Perfect for those bolder reds.
I'm hearing Cabernet Sauvignon lovers should check out Penticton then.
Absolutely. Now, if you want intense age-worthy wines, you head to the southernmost tip, Osoyoos. It's the hottest, driest spot, ideal for Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot that develop those like rich, complex flavors.
Okay, so three distinct areas, each with its own personality.
Oh.
I'm already picturing a road trip,
Mm.
tasting my way through the Okanagan Valley. But let's get down to the grapes themselves. What kind of variety are we talking about here?
Well, the Okanagan Valley grows a surprisingly wide range of grapes. You've got your classic international varieties like Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, Pinot Noir, but they also grow grapes specifically bred for cooler climates, which I think is fascinating.
So they're respecting tradition, but also like embracing the unique possibilities of the region. That's pretty cool.
Well,
What stands out to you about the white wines?
well, take Chardonnay, for example. You get such a range in the Okanagan. Some winemakers use oak barrels, for a rich, buttery style, while others opt for stainless steel tanks to highlight those like crisp mineral notes that come from the soil.
Ah, so the same grape can taste totally different depending on how it's made. What about Riesling? That's one of my favorites.
Okanagan Riesling is known for its, bright acidity and beautiful aging potential. It really showcases that interplay of cool nights and sunny days that we talked about earlier.
So I can lay down a few bottles and like let them evolve over time. Now, Pinot Gris, I know that one can be a bit more subtle. What makes the Okanagan version special?
Pinot Gris is like a chameleon, reflecting those subtle differences in each vineyard soil. For example, in your article, one winemaker, he talks about how his Pinot Gris grown near the lake has more pronounced mineral notes. Because of the higher concentration of granite in the soil.
Okay, that's a perfect example of how terroir comes to life in the glass. Now, you can't mention white wines without talking about Sauvignon Blanc. What are we getting from the Okanagan?
Okanagan Sauvignon Blanc is bursting with passion fruit, citrus, and those fresh herbal notes. Imagine yourself sitting on a sunny patio overlooking the lake. That's what these wines taste like.
Okay, I'm sold. We talk about Gewürztraminer too. I feel like that one's either a love it or hate it kind of grape.
Mm.
What are the Okanagan versions like?
The Okanagan climate really brings out the best in Gewürztraminer. It's intensely aromatic with lychee, rose petals, and spice. It's definitely a wine that makes a statement.
Sounds like a great one to share with friends and like spark some conversation. All right, we've covered a good amount of the white wines. Ready to move on to the reds?
Absolutely, let's dive in. Merlot is quite popular in the Okanagan, and it tends to be smooth and approachable, with delicious plum and chocolate notes. You could pair it with anything from like grilled salmon to a hearty pasta dish.
Yum. That sounds perfect for a casual dinner party. Now, Pinot Noir. I know that one can be like a bit finicky to grow.
Yeah.
How does it fare in the Okanagan?
Pinot Noir loves those cool Okanagan nights, and it shows in the wines. You get these elegant, delicate wines with beautiful cherry and raspberry
Okay,
flavors.
now we're talking my language. What about Cabernet Franc? I feel like that one's having a moment right now.
Cabernet Franc is often used in blends, but in the Okanagan, you'll find it shining as a single varietal wine, too. It's bright and juicy with red fruit flavors and those like intriguing spicy notes that Cabernet Franc is known for.
So we can hold its own, which is impressive. Now, we can't talk about Okanagan Reds without mentioning Cabernet Sauvignon, right?
Of course. Remember those hot pockets in Osoyoos we talked about? That's where Cabernet Sauvignon truly thrives. You get these big, powerful wines with firm tannins and incredible aging potential.
I can already imagine those dark fruit flavors and hints of cedar and tobacco that Cabernet Sauvignon is known for.
You nailed it. And lastly, let's talk about Syrah. This one's a personal favorite of mine from the Okanagan.
Okay, tell me why.
Okanagan Syrah has this incredible intensity with dark berry fruit, peppery spice, and a smoky note that's almost like a barbecue rub. It's so unique and really reflects the character of the region.
That's making me hungry. So we've got this amazing lineup of reds, but we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about ice wine, a Canadian classic.
It's true, and the Okanagan Valley is one of the few places in the world that can produce it reliably, thanks to those cold winter temperatures.
Okay, so remind me, what makes ice wine so special?
The grapes for ice wine are left on the vine to freeze naturally, and then they're pressed while still frozen, which creates an incredibly concentrated sweet juice.
I imagine that takes some serious dedication from the winemakers. Harvesting grapes in the freezing cold. What are the main grapes they use for ice wine in the Okanagan?
Vidal and Riesling are the most common. Vidal makes a richly textured ice wine with apricot and honey flavors, while Riesling ice wine tends to be a bit lighter and more floral.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. The variety of grapes and wine styles in the Okanagan Valley is truly impressive. It's definitely more than just ice wine country, as I initially thought.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the grapes, right? What about the winemaking itself? What's the approach in the Okanagan?
You're absolutely right. The winemaking plays like a crucial role. The Okanagan Valley is this fascinating blend of old world and new world approaches.
Okay, unpack that for me. What does that look like in practice?
Well, many winemakers are using traditional methods like aging their wines in oak barrels, which adds complexity and those, toasty vanilla notes you often find in wines from regions like France or Italy.
So, a nod to the classics. But you mentioned New World techniques, too.
Exactly. Okanagan winemakers are also embracing technology, using things like temperature-controlled fermentation tanks to ensure, consistent quality. And some are even experimenting with a technique called micro-oxygenation.
Micro-oxy. What now? Break that down for me. It sounds pretty high-tech.
It is pretty cool. Micro-oxygenation, it basically involves introducing tiny amounts of oxygen into the wine during aging. It can help soften tannins, stabilize color, and enhance those fruity aromas.
So they're respecting those traditional methods, but not afraid to, embrace new ideas to perfect their craft. I can definitely see how that appeals to the learner in me. But with all this variety, I'm wondering, where does someone even begin exploring Okanagan wines?
That's a great question. It can feel overwhelming, but I think a good starting point is to focus on those grapes that are truly shining in the Okanagan's unique environment. Look for those wines where the region is, putting its own spin on a classic grape, so to speak.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you were recommending some must-try Okanagan wines, where would you start?
Well, if you enjoy Pinot Noir, you're in for a treat. The Okanagan is producing some truly exceptional Pinot Noirs. Remember how we talked about those cooler pockets influenced by the lake? That's where this grape thrives.
So I'm imagining lighter-bodied reds with those classic Pinot Noir characteristics, cherry, raspberry, maybe a little earthiness.
Exactly. But what's fascinating is how the Okanagan terroir adds its own twist. The wines often have a vibrant acidity and this intriguing mineral note that you don't always find in Pinot Noirs from other regions.
Okay, that's definitely going on my list. Now, what about white wines? What would you recommend for someone who's just dipping their toes into the Okanagan scene?
Okanagan Riesling is a fantastic choice. It's a grape that loves cool climates. and it consistently delivers in this region. You'll find everything from bone-dry Rieslings with crisp minerality to those with a touch of sweetness, showing off stone fruit and honey notes. And Riesling is known for its ability to age, so you could even tuck a few bottles away and see how they evolve over time.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure with Riesling. Now, what about those of us who gravitate toward bolder reds? What's a good option in the Okanagan?
Syrah is a grape that's really exciting me in the Okanagan right now. It loves those hot, dry conditions you find in places like Osoyoos.
You mentioned a smoky quality to Okanagan Syrah earlier. What contributes to that? Is it something specific to the grape itself, or is it influenced by the region?
It's a bit of both. Syrah naturally has that peppery spice and dark fruit character, but the Okanagan terroir seems to amplify those savory, smoky notes. Some winemakers even compare it to the garrigue, those wild herbs that grow in the southern Rhone region of France, where Syrah is also prominent.
So it's almost like the Okanagan is echoing those classic Syrah characteristics, but adding its own unique twist. I love that. We've got a good mix so far. Elegant Pinot Noir, versatile Riesling, and powerful Syrah. What else shouldn't we miss when exploring Okanagan wines?
Well, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about ice wine again. It's such a unique expression of the Okanagan terroir, and you won't find it being made this well in many other places in the world.
It's true. It's become almost synonymous with Canadian wine. But now I understand why the Okanagan Valley is such a special place to produce it. But for someone who's never tried it before, what should they expect?
Imagine an explosion of flavor. Honey, apricot, candied citrus, all wrapped up in this incredibly concentrated, sweet nectar. But it's not just about sweetness. Ice wine has this amazing acidity that balances it out and keeps it from being cloying.
And I remember you mentioning that Vidal and Riesling are the go-to grapes for Okanagan ice wine.
Exactly. They both do exceptionally well here. Vidal ice wine is typically rich and unctuous, with those apricot and honey notes really shining through. Riesling ice wine, on the other hand, tends to be a bit more delicate and floral, with a citrusy brightness.
It's fascinating how the same process can yield such different expressions depending on the grape. Okay, so we've covered some of the star players in the Okanagan: Pinot Noir, Riesling, Syrah, and ice wine. But I have a feeling there's a whole lot more to discover, right?
Absolutely. We've only scratched the surface. The Okanagan Valley is all about diversity and exploration. You've got other white grapes like Gewürztraminer and Pinot Blanc. And on the red side, you'll find Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and even some exciting blends.
So there's something for everyone, and a lot of room for adventurous wine lovers to discover new favorites. But I'm curious, beyond the wines themselves, what else makes the Okanagan Valley so special?
One thing that really struck me in the article you provided is the strong sense of community among the winemakers. They're passionate about showcasing the region's potential, and they're incredibly supportive of each other.
So it's not just about competition, it's about collaboration and lifting each other up. That's so refreshing to hear.
Exactly. And it translates into this incredible energy and creativity in the Okanagan wine scene. They're constantly experimenting, pushing boundaries, and sharing knowledge, which is what makes it so exciting to follow.
It sounds like the perfect destination for someone who loves learning about wine and experiencing a region's unique culture firsthand. I'm already picturing myself wandering through vineyards, chatting with winemakers, and taking in those stunning views.
I know. It's hard to resist the allure of the Okanagan. The scenery is truly breathtaking. You've got rolling hills covered in vineyards, the sparkling blue waters of Okanagan Lake, orchards bursting with fruit, and those majestic mountains as a backdrop. It's a feast for the eyes as well as the palate.
You've convinced me. I'm adding a trip to the Okanagan Valley to my bucket list.
Yeah.
But realistically, no wine region is without its challenges. What are some of the things that the Okanagan is facing?
You're right. It's important to acknowledge the challenges. Climate change is a big one. As it is for wine regions around the world, we're seeing rising temperatures and more unpredictable weather patterns, which can impact grape growing in a number of ways.
Yeah, it makes you realize how vulnerable agriculture can be to things outside our control. What specific impacts are Okanagan winemakers seeing as a result of climate change?
Well, heat stress is a big concern. If the grapes get too hot, they can ripen too quickly, and they lose those delicate aromas and flavors that make Okanagan wines so special. There's also the risk of sunburn on the grapes, which can damage the fruit and impact quality.
I imagine those temperature swings and unpredictable seasons can make it
Yeah.
Really tough for winemakers to predict what each vintage will bring.
Absolutely. They're having to adjust their vineyard management practices, like
Huh?
using different pruning techniques or experimenting with new irrigation systems to help the vines cope with those stressful conditions.
It's a reminder that winemaking is this constant dance with nature. You have to be adaptable and resourceful to thrive,
Yep.
especially in the face of these evolving challenges.
Hmm.
Are there other concerns beyond climate change that Okanagan winemakers are dealing with?
Well, like many agricultural regions, the Okanagan is facing labor shortages. It can be difficult to find skilled workers, especially during harvest time when they need all hands on deck.
That makes sense. It's physically demanding work, and those labor shortages are impacting so many industries right now.
And of course, we can't forget about the global wine market, its competitive landscape, and Okanagan wines are still relatively new on the scene. They're up against some really well-established wine regions from around the world, so getting that recognition and shelf space can be a challenge.
It sounds like the Okanagan Valley wine industry is facing some pretty formidable hurdles, both environmental and economic.
Hmm.
But from what I've gathered, they're not backing down.
You're right. What impressed me most in the research you shared was the resilience and innovative spirit of Okanagan winemakers. They're embracing new technologies,
Hmm.
researching sustainable practices, and constantly looking for ways to improve their craft
Hmm.
and adapt to these challenges.
Can you give some examples of how they're tackling these issues head on?
Absolutely. Many wineries are implementing water conservation measures, experimenting with organic and biodynamic farming practices to reduce their environmental impact. They're also working to promote the Okanagan Valley as a premier wine destination, attracting tourism and building a strong brand reputation.
So they're taking a multi-pronged approach, focusing on environmental sustainability, economic growth, and community building. It sounds like a model for how wine regions can thrive in the 21st century.
I think so too, and it's inspiring to see their dedication to preserving this beautiful region for future generations while continuing to push the boundaries of what Canadian wine can be.
It really flips the script on that initial thought I had.
Mhm.
Canadian wine,
Yeah.
really. Now I'm thinking Canadian wine.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We explored the Okanagan Valley's unique terroir, the impressive variety of grapes, those innovative winemakers, and even the challenges they're facing. What key takeaways would you want our listener to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Canadian wine, and specifically Okanagan Valley wine, deserves a spot on your radar. It's a region that's producing high-quality, diverse wines that can rival those from anywhere else in the world.
And they're doing it while facing those environmental and economic challenges head on with resilience and innovation. I think that's a pretty powerful message.
Absolutely. It's a story of passion, dedication, and a deep connection to the land.
So for our listener who sent in this fascinating research, what final thought would you leave them with? What should they be most excited about when it comes to Okanagan Valley wines?
I'd say be open to discovery. Don't limit yourself to what you think you know about Canadian wine. Explore those different subregions, try those grape varieties you might not be familiar with, and be prepared to be surprised and delighted. Okanagan Valley wines offer something truly special, a taste of place that's both familiar and unexpected.
Well said. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. Be curious, be open-minded, and get ready to experience the magic of Okanagan Valley wines. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.
Yeah, it really does make you realize how vulnerable agriculture is to things outside of our control. What specific impacts are the Okanagan winemakers seeing as a result of climate change?
Well, heat stress is a big concern. If the grapes get too hot, they can ripen too quickly
Yeah.
and lose those delicate aromas and flavors that make Okanagan wine so special. And there's also the risk of sunburn on the grapes, which can damage the fruit and impact the quality.
I imagine those temperature swings and unpredictable seasons make it really tough for winemakers to predict what each vintage will bring.
Absolutely. They're having to adjust their vineyard management practices,
Hmm.
like using different pruning techniques or experimenting with new irrigation systems to help the vines cope with those stressful conditions.
Mm.
It's a reminder that winemaking is this constant dance with nature. You have to be adaptable and resourceful to thrive, especially in the face of these evolving challenges. Are there other concerns, beyond climate change? that Okanagan winemakers are dealing with?
Well, like many agricultural regions, the Okanagan is facing labor shortages. It can be difficult to find skilled workers, especially during harvest time when they need all hands on deck.
Right, that makes sense. It's physically demanding work, and those labor shortages are impacting, so many industries right now.
Yeah. And of course, we can't forget about the global wine market. It's a competitive landscape. And Okanagan wines are still relatively new on the scene. They're up against some really well-established wine regions from around the world. So getting that recognition and shelf space can be a challenge.
It sounds like the Okanagan Valley wine industry is facing some pretty formidable hurdles, both environmental and economic. But from what I've gathered, they're not backing down.
You're right. What impressed me most in the research you shared was the resilience and the innovative spirit of Okanagan winemakers. They're embracing new technologies, researching sustainable practices, and constantly looking for ways to, improve their craft and adapt to these challenges.
Can you give me some examples of how they're like
Yeah.
tackling these issues head on?
Absolutely. Many wineries are implementing water conservation measures, experimenting with organic and biodynamic farming practices to, reduce their environmental impact. They're also working to promote the Okanagan Valley as like a premier wine destination, attracting tourism and building a strong brand reputation.
So they're taking a multi-pronged approach, focusing on environmental sustainability, economic growth, and community building.
Right.
It sounds like a model for how wine regions can thrive in the 21st century.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's inspiring to see their dedication to preserving this beautiful region for future generations while continuing to push the boundaries of what Canadian wine can be.
It really flips the script on that initial thought I had.
Yeah.
Canadian wine. Really? Now I'm thinking.
Canadian?
Wine. Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We explored the Okanagan Valley's unique terroir, the impressive variety of grapes, those innovative winemakers, and even the challenges that they're facing. What key takeaways would you want our listener to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that Canadian wine, and specifically Okanagan Valley wine, it deserves a spot on your radar. It's a region that's producing high-quality, diverse wines that can rival those from anywhere else in the world.
And they're doing it while facing those environmental and economic challenges head on with resilience and innovation. I think that's a pretty powerful message.
Absolutely. It's a story of passion, dedication, and a deep connection to the land.
So for our listener who sent in this fascinating research, what final thought would you leave them with? What should they be most excited about when it comes to Okanagan Valley wines?
I'd say. Be open to discovery. Don't limit yourself to what you think you know about Canadian wine. Explore those different subregions. Try those grape varieties you might not be familiar with, and be prepared to be surprised and delighted. Okanagan Valley wines offer something truly special, a taste of place. It's both familiar and unexpected.
Well said. And I think that's the perfect note to end on. Be curious, be open-minded, and get ready to experience the magic of Okanagan Valley wines.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.